It goes back to my experience in Hungary. When we marched to be taken to a train to an unknown destination, we were rounded up with a yellow star. This German soldier came up to my mother and whispered something to her. And she asked me to fix up her shoelace. As I bent down, she grabbed me and we rolled down the side of the road. The rest of the people walked by. Luckily, no one noticed us. This soldier, if he would have been discovered, because he told her to do it, he would have been probably shot. He disobeyed orders, being a human being. I never knew who he was or an opportunity to thank him, but he probably saved our lives. When I go to Germany, I feel much more at home than in Austria, because the people there at least acknowledge that they done something which was wrong. When I go to Austria, a lot of people still don't admit their wrongdoings. And to me, that is basically something which is unforgivable. Because what has happened during those days, that's why I'm so shattered in what's going on around the world today, that we haven't learned from history. My name is Ernie Friedland, actually it's Ernest. Actually I was born with the name of Ernő, which is Hungarian, because my father was Hungarian. When my father perished during the Holocaust, and when I came to Australia, it became Ernest. And most people just call me Ernie. When I came to Australia, having to find a job, I was 15 years of age, I started to work in a knitting factory with machines. I wasn't very happy doing it because it was very boring work, routine work, and I like people. I like to meet people, learn from people, and see diversity in human beings. So eventually, from the firms that I was working for, they gave me an opportunity to go out and sell their products, which was a starting point for me to go out from the confines of a factory into the open spaces of the marketplace. So I traveled a little bit, and one of the manufacturers that I represented offered me a partnership. My mother, who was very, very shattered by having lost all her family, could not settle. She was really very bitter, and this gave me an example of what I should not be. So I tried to see things with a more open mind and tried to be the opposite. I felt for her in her misery, but at the same token, I felt I had to move on, to try to leave the baggage behind. So in that way, I had to find myself, I had to overcome the obstacles and come to terms with my weaknesses and try to improve on them. So when I had time and I stopped working in the field that I did, which was in the retail business, I wanted to give something back. Give something back in memory of that man. And also to thank Australia for giving me a home. That's what prompted me to try to take some action. And when I mentioned it to my wife, she thought it was a dream. What can you do as an individual? And eventually I expanded on this idea, and we came upon this Harmony project, which appealed to me because it was not confrontation, yet it expressed what we're basically aiming to have a harmonious society. To a very large extent, the memory of that incident in Hungary drove me. My children have certainly more Australian than ever, and my grandchildren certainly. So both my wife and I consider ourselves very Austrian. We feel we belong here. My biggest achievement is recreating my life out of the shattering experience I had as a child. So refocusing and sorting myself out was probably much greater value to me than the road of Australia.
My name is Philip Feinstein. I come from South Africa. I came here in 1972. I had to leave South Africa because in South Africa there was the apartheid system, and I was totally opposed to the apartheid system. Coming into Australia as a tourist, I was welcomed with open arms, and the way the Australians saw me was, well, I come from a rugby country, well, welcome mate, you're like us, you like rugby. So it was very, very easy to assimilate. I very often get asked the question, where am I from, why did I come here, what is my background? Those questions to me don't count for very, very much, because it's where I am now and what I'm doing now that is more important. After a short period in Australia, I really began to feel that this is my home. I was accepted, and of course at the same time I was able to contribute. Since I've been in Australia, I have found it to be quite a pleasure to be involved in helping people. But the biggest achievement, I have to say, for me has been the refugee program. About 9 years ago, I decided to contact the Villawood Detention Centre to see if I can help with music. But I knew that music can help people with stress. So I contacted the Villawood Detention Centre. They said, come on out, we want to talk to you. And I had a meeting with them, and they said, yep, we'd love you to help us. And we were in the music room. And the music room was this huge big room. It was like a double garage. And I looked around the room to see what instruments they had, and they had nothing. And I said, where are your music instruments though? And they said, oh, we haven't got any instruments. We thought you were going to bring us instruments. So I then realized that I had to get them music instruments. I also realized after Villawood that it's important that I concentrate on the other detention centers as well. I then got a partnership going with the Uniting Church and with some synagogues, whereby people in other cities, Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne and so on, where members of the public would take music instruments to these centers, and the actual people from the Uniting Church, they would then deliver the instruments to the detention center that's closest to them. So what I'm saying in effect is that the Music for Refugees program is now throughout the whole country. With regard to music and singing, well, I have these big sheets of paper with all the words up, and we stick the words up on the wall, and everybody just follows the words, and it's fantastic because a lot of the songs they know, some of these songs are very old, you know, from 60s and 70s, and Rolling Stones stuff they know, and the Beatles stuff they know. So a lot of songs they know, and then there are some classics like Summertime. Some of these guys have got the most amazing voices, and I think it's very, very important that Australians think what their background is. Because other than Aboriginal people, most, if not every single Australian comes from a refugee background. And let's give people the opportunity. When the Vietnamese people came over here, initially some of the Australians were a little bit anti-Vietnamese people, contributed so much to this country. When the Greek people came here, and the Italians, even prior to the Vietnamese people, again, they were seen as not in a very good light, but they've contributed wonderfully well to this country. So what I'm saying is, these refugees coming over here at the moment, whether it be from Iran, Iraq, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Pakistan, wherever it is, these people can contribute to our country. They will benefit Australia, so we should be welcoming them to Australia.
It was rather unexpected. We didn't have all of our, we had really just like 2 luggages with us. The situation which was developing in Poland at that time wasn't really expected when I left Poland just for a holiday. The last actually we expected is that we will never come back to Poland. I'm Małgorzata Sawicki. Actually my popular name, or common name, it is rather Margaret than Małgorzata. I work at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. I'm head of Frames Conservation section. When I came to Australia, I think that I was incredibly happy. I appreciated so much that Australia embraced me, that Australia actually allowed me to come. It was growing feeling here like at home. I think at the moment when my children were born in 1980s, and I was very conscious to bring them up with the idea that they belong to this country. I was growing up with them, feeling for this country and learning this country as well. I think it was really up to me. It was really up to me how far I can go. The one thing which I learned very early when I came to Australia is that you evaluate here in this country on merit. It really doesn't matter where you come from. I came to Australia with no English whatsoever, so for me learning English to be able to communicate and develop professionally was absolutely the first choice. And it was really up to me how my life will be developing. It was up to me to find the work. It was really up to me, nobody else. I always was feeling great love for my sons and sort of the will from myself to show them what they can achieve in life. It's really what sort of is important or sort of that's driving me to get on this developing path. I was thinking that you can't really explain what you want to achieve in life if you don't really show your own example. If my sons will be seeing me as a sort of the model for that's, of course, I came as a refugee, but then was able to progress how I wanted without really almost any interruptions. That will be for them a great drive as well to go and do in the world what they want to their capabilities. And they were capable of achieving really incredible things. This is great joy for Mom. Many people who actually ask me about my background, I always respond that I'm from Australia. And yes, if they are interested, I obviously will say that I'm Australian of the Polish origin. I don't feel that despite of the accent, you should be really seen through the prism of your background all the time. I think that it's more important of how much you give to this society, how much you are assimilated with this society, not really what kind of accent we are talking with. Division between the groups in the society doesn't do really anything good to the assimilation, as well as to creating one Australian country that we all would like to have. I think that it is our common goal to see all us to cooperate together and live together and bring our children with the great value and having great value to all what Australia can offer. I have quite a few achievements in my life. The most important and something that I'm most proud of course, are my two sons. Both my sons were fantastic men. I think that bringing those two boys with the fantastic ability, feeling that they belong to this country, that was definitely my greatest achievement. But then is of course my professional achievement, which was a great part of my life and always is still a great part of my life. Well, my God, first one probably it was that I was able to learn English to such a degree that I was able to go back to university, study for master and then eventually for the PhD, do my research, develop professionally, go all over the world to represent Australia on varied conferences, giving the lectures and courses, having students from overseas coming here, establishing this part of the conservation laboratory at the gallery, become expert in my profession, recognized internationally. I think that's all of that are great achievements. I think that I was able to go through, not only because, of course, of my internal drive, ambitions, or will to do so, but because I had fantastic environment in this country and also in this workplace.
Well, we arrived in an area in northern Australia called Ashmore Reef, and I remember one of the earliest memories that I had was the beauty of the reef and of the Navy that intercepted us. And the Navy people were really, really professional. They were really good, down-to-earth people. My name is Nasir Nasir. I was born in Iraq, and I came to Australia in late 1999. You know, when I left Iran, I left on a fake Iraqi passport, and I flew to Malaysia, and then I flew to Indonesia. In Indonesia, we stayed about 4 months, and we tried 3 times before we were successful in getting to Australia. The first 2 attempts were very bad. The boat almost sank, so we had to go back to Indonesia, and it was only on the 3rd occasion that we were successful to come to Australia. Yeah, I met very, very good people, and I was encouraged by them. Those people had a very positive impact on me. In the first years, I started by doing jobs that I never intended to do, like being a security guard, a taxi driver, farmhand. This was all before I got my interpreting and translation licenses. Since 2003, the jobs that I've done, I've always believed in. The first one was working in an employment agency, and that was the job that really, really got me into what I want to do in Australia. Well, the first achievement for me was to hang in there when things were really difficult, to experience TPV and to wait and to continue and to go on when things were not certain. I think that is the big achievement. The second achievement is the careers that I had in Australia. I've got now my own little teaching business. I was lucky that I was in careers that could help people. The third achievement is the law degree that I finished. It is not easy to finish law in Australia when English is not your first language. And finally, one big achievement for me is to bring the diploma of Aboriginal legal advocacy to Campbelltown. No one has done that before. It's not offered in many places in Australia. In fact, one RTO offers it in New South Wales, and one RTO offers it in Queensland. This diploma is designed for Aboriginal people to help Aboriginal people who might have difficulties with law. I have 2 children from my first marriage, and my partner also has 2 kids, and so we are 6 now. I do consider myself an Australian now, but there is always a sense that I am also different because I did not grow up in this country. English is not my first language. I don't have a lot of interest in Australian politics. The sports that I grew up with are not Australian sports. I still do not understand the cricket. I still don't understand the footy. I mean, I love Australia and I consider it my homeland, but I feel I am not like the mainstream Australian people. Nothing will make me feel like everyone because of the experiences and the realities of life. So Australia is my home country, but I came to accept that I'll be always an immigrant in this country. Sometimes it's really, really difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it's really, really difficult to stay positive when everything is green around you. I had that experience. I was in that experience, but thanks heaven, I've never lost hope. And my message is to have something to look forward to and hang on there, be patient, and things will somehow work out.
My name's Gladys and I'm 20 years old and I'm a uni student. I live in Sydney with my family, but originally I was born in Uganda. I was born in a refugee camp. We came as refugees. I originally lived in Darwin in 2000 and we came to Sydney in 2003 and that's where I've been ever since. Do I identify myself as Australian? It's a hard question. So I always get questions as to like, where I'm from, and I'm always like pitted as like this outsider. So it's really hard to identify as Australian when people are constantly, asking me like how long I've been here and, where, I was born and, how like life is where I'm from. Because I always get this idea that I don't belong here. I'm always from the outside, I guess. They just look at me through my skin color and through my background. They will always just see that, like they don't see me as a person or anything like that, that they always just, assume things that, I'm this outsider and stuff. So it does make me feel upset, but, I've just tried to like learn to deal with it, growing up. I think I feel Australian when like I'm watching like Socceroos or something like that. And I'm just like, yeah, go Australia. I want to be identified as an African Australian. I just want to feel like this is my home, I guess. That's all I want. I just want to feel like, you know, I've grown up here all my life. I want people to at least acknowledge that when they speak to me. You know, I've been Australian longer than I've been a refugee, so that's probably what I'd want the most. I think the changes I'd like to see with society is this, I guess, erasing this idea of an ideal Australian. Australia's always been multicultural, and no one is like a real Australian unless you're Indigenous, like unless you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. So anyone else who isn't Indigenous, we have to kind of recognise that, yeah, we're all from different backgrounds, but we're all Australian, and that's what makes up Australia, this, I guess, melting pot society. We have to recognise that, you know, not all Australians are Anglo or anything like that, and reflect that, and that's what I think should happen.
Hi, my name is Vong Nguyen, and I'm from a Vietnamese refugee background. It started in 1989 when my family came to the Philippines by boat to seek asylum. Together with the other Vietnamese refugees, we were stuck in the Philippines. So I stayed in the camp for 10 years. It was fun. Don't worry, it was fun. And then after that, we all were released to the bigger society, like the Filipino society. But then again, the Filipino government at the moment allowed us to stay there legally, yet they didn't give us a legal status. So then a lot of us became in limbo. My family stayed there for 15 years in total. However, there are other Vietnamese refugees who were stuck there for like more than 20 years. So in 2002, my family were lucky enough to be resettled to Australia under a special humanitarian program. When I first came to Australia, I thought that it was paradise. It's just like any other stories. You were a little refugee boy growing up in the camp. You were told about Australia and the United States and Canada, all these beautiful countries and the opportunities, the life that it would give you. And so I had just that perfect image of Australia. To be honest, it delivered. It was beautiful. Until this moment, I still hold that image of Australia in my mind, that it was something perfect. Do I think of Australia as home? As you know, as a 16-year-old boy, when I came to Australia, I struggled with the concept of identity and home. I come from a mixed background in a sense that my mom was part Chinese and my dad was Vietnamese, and then I grew up in the Philippines. And so when I came to Australia in my formative years, I was a bit confused about identity and home. People asked me, so where you're from? I said Australia. And of course they're confused because they're just like, but you don't look Australian, you're not white. And I'm like, yes, but my passport says I'm Australian. And for a while there, I did not know whether I could consider Australia home, but that was back in the day. Of course, after so many years living in Australia, working, studying, making lots of good friends, and now I definitely can see that Australia home. In terms of perception, when I first came, the people, they were confused. They did not know that there were still Vietnamese refugees people out there. And so when I said that I came from a Vietnamese refugee background in the Philippines, they were surprised. They were just like, oh, I didn't know that they still have refugees. And if you were a refugee, then how could you speak English so well? And at first I was always very offended. I was just like, oh, what do you mean? Refugees can speak English too, you know. But then again, after a while, I learned that they meant it in a positive way. As a person with refugee background, I experienced some sort of discrimination or disadvantages. And then being gay as well, being the minority of the society, you also have that disadvantage. I believe that I'm a very confident gay man, and I believe in good work. I believe in good ethics and results. If I do this work right, and if I do it well, then eventually they will need me. And then they will need me to do the work, so therefore they have to respect me, no matter what background or what identity I have. I went to the Philippines first to visit a few remaining friends there who were still, at the time, unfortunately, was still stuck there after 18 years of being refugees. I came into the office and I said, look, I'm here for a week or two and I would love to be useful. The very next day, I was asked to just go with them to the Senate. We were lobbying at the time for the Vietnamese refugees to be resettled in the US and in Canada and in other countries, the remaining one. I was rushed rushed into all these meetings, and only then did I realize my ability to be able to assist the work that we were doing. I went back to Australia and I thought hard about it, and I thought my university can wait. I can take a year off, but these people cannot wait anymore, and therefore I went back. And I'm happy to also report that that trip was successful, because after that, all the remaining Vietnamese refugees who've been stuck there for 18 and some 20 years have all been resettled to Canada, and some also went to Norway. So that was a happy moment for me. And currently been offered a job. Now I'm going to manage an NGO that will deal with the civil society work in Vietnam. 5 achievements that I have been very proud of in my life. The first achievement I would say that is to make it to uni. I definitely did not come from a very privileged background, and everything was a struggle for me. For a refugee, it is not quite simple. There are, disadvantages like language, like education. You did not receive this amount of education that you had when you were in detention camp. The second is to be able to integrate. I suppose integration is quite important when you first come into Australia. You're trying to find your way around. You are trying to form your identity. You're trying to say that I'm Australian, feel proud of it, and then not get too upset when people don't think that you are. The third thing was give back to the organization that helped me and my family to come to Australia. When you move on with life, you got to remember what you were given. The fourth one, I suppose, being able to find employment, as well as, a lot of us, not just people from a refugees background, but the general Australian public, some of us find it hard to find a job. I worked with the unaccompanied refugees as a youth worker. I have been a youth worker almost 3 years, but I did not feel like I was working a day. And the fifth one is this interview, where I feel like what I've done in the past actually was on a good path, that I was doing something right, that I was trying to live my life the best that I can. And in order to see all my efforts being recognized, being seen as something positive, I consider this a very big achievement. And therefore, I should thank you as well for having this interview with me.
My name is Christina, but in Australia it became shortened to Tina. I came with my partner back in 2012. In our home country, we were human rights activists, and I guess too much active and visible, so we ended up under Australian protection here. When we came to Australia and it was time to decide, okay, what are we doing now? For some time I felt that I could not do any of human rights work again, because there were two feelings. There was a feeling of guilt, before yourself, that you left for the LGBT community, that you did not stand to the end and, you took the decision to leave the country. But also there was a shame for surviving, when a lot of queer people who fought for their rights, they didn't. For me, being a queer refugee, I'm in a very tricky situation. I cannot fit into the queer community because they've got no idea what to do with me as a refugee. I cannot fit in the refugee community because I'm queer, and for some people it can be a little bit controversial. And at the same time, I cannot fit into my ethnic community, again, because I'm queer. It took me a long time to come to terms with those notions, but luckily I did, and they brought me to do my PhD. In my PhD, I'm looking into what does it mean to be a queer refugee woman. So I'm looking into the lived experiences of myself and other women who are queer and come from refugee backgrounds, trying to understand both our loss, trauma and survival at the same time, trying to understand what is our life and how can we live it to the full potential without, trying to fix ourselves in any ways. I don't like to talk about my refugee past, and I try to avoid telling that story to anyone. But when that comes up in the conversations, what I don't like is that it immediately reduces me to that singular identity. For many people, and fortunately for them, there is no real understanding of what violence means, or persecution, or any infringement of their body or rights, because for many of those, it's a very abstract notions that I've got from movies, or like media. But for many people from refugee backgrounds, these words actually have, bodily reactions. People need to understand people from refugee backgrounds come with a massive trauma. And for many, they just don't want to talk about that. And questions like that, they will only trigger some memories. So I think that this realization of that The whole conversation really need to shift, brought me to what I do now. Currently, I work at the Refugee Advice and Casework Service, which is the longest running refugee legal centre in New South Wales. And I'm really proud to be part of the team who brings real changes to people's lives. The other day I came across a phrase that your home is where you stop running. So now living in Australia and calling this place my home, I really want to identify myself as Australian. I want to be able to function in a society on equal terms. I want to be able to say that I am Australian and no one will question that. Because sometimes when people ask me where I'm from and I joke and I say I'm from Newtown, they're like, oh no, you didn't understand my question, where are you from originally? I want to have a right to say that I'm Australian, and I want people to respect that right to identify that way. I think people don't understand that for us who come from refugee background, there is no place anymore to identify with. The place that we left does not exist anymore in the same way that it did before. So I think that what we all need is a place that we can call home right now. I'm blessed to be partner of the project director, so she made me join this project. Joking. It started as autobiographical reflection of our journey, and the more we were involved, the more we realized that in the current environment, we really need to give people hope. To people who, despite the odds and overcoming the most traumatic past, now need a future to believe in. I guess coming from peer perspective, we just want to say that yes, it is really hard to rebuild your life again, but everyone has the strength to do it. Also with this project, we really want to shift the discussion towards the hope and strength and survival, and stop parading victimhood and vulnerability of people from refugee backgrounds. We really want to celebrate their dignity.
Hi, my name is Arash Bordbar. I'm originally from Iran, Shiraz, and I've been a refugee in Malaysia for about 5 years, and I recently came to Australia about a year ago. I speak Persian, English, I know Malaysian, and I can speak a little bit Chinese, and I'm learning French. I do believe that Australia is my home, although whether I belong here or not is a bit questionable. I'm always thankful and appreciate the fact that I could come to Australia, and the opportunity that gave to me and my family to build a new life here again. What makes Australia home and what makes me to belong here is certainly the amount of amazing people that I've met here, friends that we have made become like our family, and of course the people from different culture and different background here made it much easier to integrate with the culture here in Australia. I always do get the question that where I'm coming from, and sometimes it makes you very sad because people really care what is your background, then continue being in friendship or relationship with you. Yeah, so most of the time they ask, oh, where I'm coming from, Iran, oh yeah, are you a refugee? Oh, then they try to be a bit far and get some distance. It does make you upset always, and you just have to deal with it. My biggest achievement, I think, is being able to enroll into the university and study again. Currently a full-time student at University of Western Sydney in taking a degree in engineering bachelor. In addition, being selected to represent Australia in Geneva for UNHCR consultation and be the voice of refugees youth was one of my biggest achievements as well. And thirdly, it gave me the motivation and inspiration to advocate on behalf of the youth and young refugees, and I'm currently a volunteer for many different NGO organizations like Urban Diversity Center and Multicultural Youth Advocacy Network, because I believe that youth can bring change. I love traveling. One of my biggest dreams when I was a child was to travel around the world. And in Australia, I love to go to Western Australia and travel around whole Australia because the nature is amazing, really beautiful. And the countries that I would love to travel is Brazil, Spain and Italy that I really like to visit.